Hey, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. It's been a while. I've got some announcements, and then we're going to talk about what this video is about. First announcement, if you are going to the Michigan GT, I should see you there. I've already got my ticket. I've got my daughter's ticket. We are looking forward to playing in the Firefight event at the Michigan GT. And if you're feeling super adventurous, the next day, which is the 4th of October, which is a Saturday, I will be running a firefight tournament. Every year I'm involved with my brother with a barbecue cook-off that happens in the city of Knox, Indiana. And it's really cool. There's car shows, there's brisket, all kinds of good stuff. And I'll be running a firefight tournament that day as well. Unfortunately for me, Michigan GT happened to overlap with that event this year because I have nothing to do with when the event is scheduled. I just support with events and, manpower, stuff like that. But that being said, I will be running a 1500 point 3-round tournament the following day. So if you're interested, I'll have that link and that event made up in the Firefight Tournament app pretty soon here. So keep your eyes open for that. It may actually already be done, but I think I just need to add the packet. If you, like me, are a big fan of Firefight, I definitely recommend the Litco Firefight tokens. Those are acrylic and they're gorgeous. I've got my own set. They are available at litco.net. I'm not sponsored in any way. They're not paying me to say this. I just wanted to show everybody because I did actually have a hand in their construction. And then my buddy over at Dankless, he was the one that got everything kicked off. I just had a hand in their design and things like that. We tried to make them as similar to the original tokens as possible without blatantly ripping them off. You're going to get shield tokens for being broken, cloud tokens for if you got hit with a smoke grenade, activation tokens, overwatch tokens, hit the dirt tokens, objective markers, damage tokens, and then even hit modifiers. So there's a lot in there. There's a ton of tokens, and there's almost enough for 2 players. And I'm actually going to have a set or 2 with me at the Michigan GT so that I can give them to one of the cooler opponents that I end up playing against. So recently we did a tournament. It was a firefight tournament. It was 1,250 points. We were going to do 4 rounds to simulate what was going on at the Michigan GT, but we stopped after 3 because we ended up having a few drops. We went from, I think, 10 registrants down to 6 is where we landed. So there was no reason to do those 4 rounds. We ended up stopping at 3. I came in second. I lost to Asterians in the final round. We're going to talk about what happened that game because there were definitely some things that I could have done better, but there were some things that I just didn't have, and I didn't realize how important they were, and I might do a whole separate video on that as well. But we're going to start off with the command units as always. I've got double progenitors. They're just progenitors. They hand out haze grenades. They're still really good. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to run against my first 2 matches were against a melee army, so the progenitors were almost useless in those matches. The 3rd match was into Asterians, and honestly, they were useful outside of dice. I definitely got my haze grenades handed out, did the things that I was supposed to, but unfortunately for me, my opponent, who not only did he play the game very well, but he also had the benefit of having some pretty nice dice with his assassin tank, so it didn't matter that I was haze grenades on anything because whatever that tank shot at, he would just hit damage. That was it. There was nothing I could do. And again, some games are like that. You have games where the dice are just gonna make the game harder for you. He and I had a really great, really close game. I think it was either a 2 or a 4-point game, and it came down to the last turn. So I'm really happy with how everything went. He's really happy, and we both walked away having learned and better players, so that's a positive. I took a brood mother. I don't know how I feel about her. I still think she's expensive. I said that before and I'll say it again. I understand she's 7 armor with, I think, 3 hit points, 4 hit points. But she doesn't really bring anything to the table outside of a green die and her order. And I don't know that her green die and her order are worth 100 points. I could be wrong, but historically, I have performed better with different command units than I have with the Broodmother. And I've tried her in multiple games. I've run her in a couple different tournaments, and I just feel like she's a little underwhelming. And maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I need to add a couple Brood Guard to her unit or something else to her unit to kind of make her feel a little better. But overall, I just think that she doesn't do enough for her points. And there's just better, cheaper options or even better, similar options. But I also don't need a ton of command points for the way that I play. And that could be part of it, is that I'm not spending a ton of command points. So that green die is kind of wasted for me. Whereas I could just benefit from another black die or something along those lines. Let's see. We have 2 units of crawlers, and they're crawlers. I have no complaints. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. I could run them up, get them on objectives. I use them as my early game trading pieces a lot of times to try to bait out charges. So I would maybe sprint a crawler onto an objective, and while their unit strength 10, or while they have 10 models, they're overwhelmed. So then their unit strength is 3. Sorry, I'm getting my verbiage conflicted from different games. But crawlers are fantastic for what you pay the points for. And honestly, I don't even know that I need 10, because most of the time I've lost a crawler and they're down to unit strength 2 instead of 3. But I'm not saving that many points by having 10, or by having, I think, 7 or 8, whatever the minimum is, instead of 10. So it's just one of those where, especially we ended up playing the mission where you have to hold the home objective and the one out in no man's land. Having a unit strength 3 unit on your home deployment zone objective makes it a lot harder for your opponent to just walk up and take it, which is also nice. I have 2 units of stalkers, a 12, so a 13 and a 12, and that was mostly because of points. I was kind of shifting things around, trying to figure things out. You'll see as we dig into this, there's one very important piece I don't have in this list, and there's arguably 1 or 2 squads I could have dropped, but I wanted to test some things out. They're stalkers. Again, I have no complaints. I've got a conceptual list built around stalkers and maligni and crawlers, and running a couple of creepers or master creepers and a creeper unit. And I'll be curious to put that on the table. That may end up being what comes with me to the Michigan GT. We'll see. But I will continue to advocate for stalkers. I think they're fantastic for their points. I think they're one of the best troop choices in the game when you look at what they bring to the table and how much they cost. And they have great order support. If you've got the right commanders, there's nothing they really can't do outside of damage something with heavy armor, as we found out. And that goes into that game against Asterian. So like I said, we'll touch on that in a little bit. I've got 2 squads of Maligni. I don't hate them. I don't love them. They're Maligni. They're fine. 75 points is weird. If they get much cheaper, they become very easy to spam. If they get much more expensive, they're not worth taking, so they're kind of just a weird unit. I have no gripes about them. I think if I were to continue playing 1 or 2 units, I'd go back to how I did it before, where I had a squad inside a tunneler, and I used them for late game objective grabbing or hopping out and clearing off objectives, things like that. I don't think 2 on the table was the play, but again, I'm trying some different things, and that was one of the things I'm trying. Nightmares, again, anybody that's ever watched my channel knows that I think Nightmares are the bee's knees. I think they're one of the best units in this army. I'm a little biased because I love the models. Couple that with the fact that I also tend to play a very melee-centric, aggressive play style, and they bring everything to the table that I want. I brought 4 Nightmares for 144 points, and I had the heavy combat drill on 2 of them, and then the twin combat drills on the other 2. A unit of 3 tunnel runners. I love tunnel runners. I think the models are cool. I think they're very flexible. I don't think there was a game in which I was sad that I had them. I definitely could have maybe done some things differently into the Asterians, but part of that was just kind of dice. Like I said, I had the assassin tank kind of dead to rights, and then the tunnel runners just kind of shit the bed when I rolled their dice, which that's going to happen sometimes. It is what it is. There's nothing you can do about that. That being said, I think they're great. I may make the argument that they're a touch overpointed, but again, it's one of those where if they come down too much, they could get really silly. But I believe they're 55 points a model. Let's double check that. I can't adjust it right now. Let me double check it over here. Tunnel runners. 60 for the first one, 55 for the second one. I could make the argument that maybe it's 60 for the first one and 50 for each one after that. But again, I still play them at their current price, so they must not be too bad. you know. I got a brick of Broodguard. I still stand by the opinion that these are absolute trash. They are not worth their points. I've had, like again, my buddy at Thankless was trying to tell me what makes them good. And I understand when you look at them on paper, they look very good. They're armor 7. They've got 2 hit points. They've got advanced training so they can get orders all the time. They've got elite. They've got control fire and counter charge. They have it burns to get over their shitty shoot skill. It's not that bad, but you know what I mean. And then they've got 3 dice at AP2 with their halberds. And on paper, they look really good. But on the table, my experience with them is that they don't do anything well. They get 3 dice at AP2, which is like, they'll kill some enforcers, which is good, you know. I'm not complaining, but at the same time, so will nightmares. They have an It Burns weapon, and I think I've been pretty vocal about how I feel about It Burns. I think most of the time it's not worth taking. I think there are just better options out there for most matchups. I think if they had a pinning weapon, that would be better, because It Burns is a nerve check to activate a unit. And to be honest, most of the armies where I want that nerve check to activate a unit, they just have good nerve. Like, I would want that It Burns to activate enforcers, and they just have a 4-up nerve. I would want that It Burns to activate dwarves, and they have a 4-up or a 3-up nerve or something silly. Asterians have like a 2-up nerve. You know, so it's one of those where it's handy to have it, but I don't think it's as good as Mantic seems to think it is, because there's just better options for some of the other units. If I wanted a better It Burns weapon, I'd just take Night Terrors. If I wanted a better It Burns option, I could take the It Burns weapon on the Tunnelers, for example. I wouldn't waste my points on a 2-die 0 AP It Burns weapon. I could supercharge it with my supercharge order, but the only thing that gives me is AP1, and then hit rolls of 1 just do a damage and pin me. And so I just, again, I want to like them because I love the models and I think they're super cool. But 4 Broodguard is 130 points. And 4 Nightmares is 144 points. And that's with 2 heavy combat drills. Don't forget, I could tweak the way the Nightmares are kitted out. I could swap those heavy combat drills for It Burns weapons if I wanted to. Or I could just run them all with twin combat drills instead of the heavy. So, like, with a Nightmare, you could take a Chem Thrower and a Combat Drill. They lose 1 attack, but they keep AP1 and Vicious on their melee. And then they have the same stupid weapon that the Broodguard have. And if you do that for 2 of them, you save 10 points. So now you're talking almost the exact same price as Broodguard. And it's one of those, I understand Broodguard bring extra flamers. You get 4 with 4 of them, and they have advanced training. I don't care. Like, they just, I don't know. I don't mean to rant so hard about them. I just put them on the table, and I just feel like they're a letdown every game. I've never put them on the table and thought, man, I'm glad I brought Broodguard today. And I've never put Nightmares on the table and thought, man, like, you know, I don't know. It's just one of those things. And then Mutant Rat Fiend, he's the bee's knees. I'm not going to dig too much into him. Now, what I will say about this list is I didn't have an anchor unit, and I'll kind of talk about that a little bit. I had Rat Fiend, I had Tunnel Runners, but I didn't have anything to kind of pull the pressure off of my army. And, you know, one of the things I realized when I did my game against Asterians, and, you know, like I said, that assassin was deleting everything it looked at. Shot my Rat Fiend off the table. Rat Fiend was in cover with haze grenades, and dude just like spiked his die roll, spiked his damage roll, spiked his devastating roll, and just picked it up. There's nothing you can do about it. But what I didn't have was a tunneler. And I want to talk about tunnelers, and that's going to segue into a conversation. So this video is going to end up being a little bit longer because I want to segue that into a conversation. I thought about making it its whole separate video, and I may kind of explore it in depth a bit more, but I want to talk about it. I've heard and I've read and I've seen everybody talk about how good tunnelers are. They're so good. They're amazing. They're the bee's knees. They're the best thing ever. They're oppressively good. So we're going to look at them and we're going to talk about them. And they just got beat up. They're still fine. They're still playable, but they definitely got kind of the bad touch from the rules committee, so to speak. And I think it's been every version of the tunneler either got a points hike or some sort of rules adjustment. I wouldn't swear to it. But the base tunneler, same points, right? It didn't go up in points. It's 110 base. But your defensive shielding is now 15 points, which I think it was before. It might have been 10. But you also lose all your transport capacity. So you now have to spend 20 points to make it a transport if you want to carry anything in it. Before, regardless of the points, you kept 5 of your transport capacity. And so now to play it the way I used to play it, if we did that, it'd be 165 points. So I think it's a 20-point increase to run it the way I used to run it because of having to buy that transport capacity. That's pretty spicy when most of the tournaments are at 1250. And I understand players were spamming them and people were having a hard time getting over the spam. And not to sound like a dick, but I guess my answer to that is just be better because they're not invincible. I understand they're frustrating. But if they've got 2 tunnelers at a 1250 point game, even before the points hikes, we're talking about almost 300 points of their army. Now I understand that that's still a lot of stuff that they could get because the troops are really cheap. I don't think the tunnelers are good enough to warrant what happened. I think the rule change that they got is super fair. You can't use defensive shielding on another vehicle. You can use your shield on yourself, and you can use defensive shielding on non-vehicles. I think that rules adjustment is super fair, so that a tunneler can't shield for a tunneler, and then the other tunneler can't shield for a tunneler, and you have this weird aura of shields. I'm completely behind that. But I would probably have made it to where they just can't affect other tunnelers, period. Because the idea that they can't affect a tunnel runner, kind of weird, but it is what it is. In addition to that, I don't know that they needed the transport nerf, which is an indirect points hike if you want it to be a transport. What I'm using all of this to say was my lack of tunneler in my list is 100% what kept me from being in a position to win that game against Austin, the Asterians player. He played it very well, and I realized that it isn't that the tunneler is that good. It's that important to a competitive list. Even just a single tunnel, not because of, oh my god, this thing's so good, but because of the amount of pressure it can take off the rest of your army. That shield does a lot. And if you play it smart, turn 1, the only thing that's going to really be hitting that shield is something like an assassin tank. Or maybe if you're playing against Forge Fathers and they got the tank with the 8-shot gun. That being said, it's also height 4. So historically what I would do is I'd put that tunneler down and then I would put my Rat Fiend behind it because it's height 4 and it would just block line of sight to the Rat Fiend. And then when I was ready, I'd move the tunnel and then charge with the Rat Fiend with a double activation. The shield was more to protect the tunnel and potentially anything else nearby, or if somebody got a flank on me through like a subterranean or aerial deployment. And just having that one tunneler makes the game easier. Which is, again, it's interesting. I've started calling them linchpin units because they're just that important to your list. I would argue that the Asterian's assassin tank is also a linchpin unit because of its ability to tag things from across the board effectively. And I don't think there's much in the game it can't just one-shot if dice are really good. So it's one of those where I didn't mean this to be kind of a bitch or a rant about the nerfs that the tunneler got, but more after running a few games without a tunneler, it became very apparent to me that while yes, you can win games without the tunneler, it's not that it's really good, it's that the role it fills can't be filled by anything else. And so I'd be really interested to see if maybe it keeps the rule change, but we kind of get an adjustment in points, or if people start running more 1,500 point events. I do both. I do 1,250 and 1,500. It just depends on what I'm trying to do. 1250 is my beginner friendly stuff, and then 1500 is usually we've got a paint requirement, we're going all in, I want experienced players, and so that's why I kind of approach it that way. But yeah, it's one of those, I'm going to do a more in-depth video about linchpin units and things like that. But I wanted to kind of touch on it because I didn't realize how much of an impact it was going to have until I played a game without it. Because I don't think I've played a single game without a tunneler. I've always had at least one variant of it, whether I take a saturation tunneler, whether I take the regular tunneler. I've never played the tangled tunneler. It just doesn't appeal to me. I don't feel like it brings a lot to the table from a competitive sense. I know there are other people out there that think they're awesome, but that's the beauty of Firefight, is that most things are playable and most things can be worked. There's only a handful of things where they're just not good. Like claw shots are just not good. I would argue that Broodguard are just not good. And I'd actually argue that the Tangle isn't very good, but that's mostly because of the points you're paying. But again, it's just opinion. You know, your mileage could vary, and there's going to be a lot of variables that affect that. Matchups are going to affect that. Terrain's going to affect that. So there's a lot to discuss and unpack there. So when I make these blanket statements, just know that it's coming from my personal experience. And if you've been able to play them with great effect and you're like, hey man, you're wrong. Well, it's not that I'm wrong. It's not that you're wrong. It's that we just play differently and we like different things. But round one, I played against, we're going to get back on track, sorry. Round one, I played against, I don't even remember, Night Stalkers. Round one, I played against Night Stalkers. Pretty good game. I think I won by like 10 points. Newer player. We didn't get to finish the game because of that, but that's okay. He learned a lot. We had a good time. That was what was important. Round two, my poor daughter. Round two, I pulled Izzy just because of how well she did her first round, and then she played me round two, and then I dropped the hammer on her. And then round three, that got me my matchup with Austin, the Asterians. And like I said, I just did not have an answer for that assassin tank, and with the way it was able to just lift things, there was just nothing I could do. So, to be fair, I think our kill points were pretty close. I think he killed about 1,000 points in my army, and I killed about 800 or 900 points of his, and it was only about a 4 victory point game. I think the final score was like 12-16 or 14-16. It was something like that. So I still put up a good fight. It's just when we got to that final turn, I just didn't have enough on the table. And the other thing that the tunneler brings to the table is you've got some anti-tank melee, and you can put anti-tank shooting on it. And that's why it's so important, because rats don't have access to a ton of anti-tank shooting that's like pretty good. You could take, I think, what is it, the Rumbler? Is that the one? Yeah, it gets the super heavy ray gun, the tunneler, the Tangle tunneler. But most of your anti-tank is tied up in some sort of tunneler chassis. And the only way to me, the only way to not run anti-tank is with a saturation tunneler, because at that point you're just rolling so many dice. And it still has, I think it still has anti-tank melee. Let's find out real quick. Yeah, the Rock Crusher drills. So you've got 4 dice at AP4 and anti-tank. So you have anti-tank melee, and it's still pretty rugged at armor 7 with heavy armor and I think 4 hit points. And if you give it transport capacity, it goes up a hit point. So again, it's not that overall, I had a great time at the tournament. Again, learned a lot. I was real glad to play against the Asterians list. That was a pretty spicy list. I'll see if I can dig it up and we can kind of go over it. But I will say, I've played quite a few games with Austin, and he plays his assassin tank the same way I do my tunneler, and that's that we recognize that it's just a linchpin unit. And when I do that video, that standalone video about linchpin units, I'll be curious to hear what everybody's feedback is, because I want to know what other armies have and don't have that we think are linchpin units. But yeah, that was the list. That was my experience with the tournament. I'm sorry I didn't dive super deep like I usually do. I usually have like pictures and talk about rounds and turns. But it was one of those where I am just now getting back into the swing of making my videos. I'm looking to start recording every Thursday is my plan. And then I can edit them hopefully on Thursdays. And I'm going to try to get them up on Thursday. If not, I can record on Thursday and have them up by that following weekend. So I want to thank everybody for hanging out with me for a little bit, talking about my list. You can tell me how bad it was, and that's fine. I don't mind. And I'm getting ready to start a Firefight League. It will be, I think, 4 rounds. I think we have 10 players. And we're doing 1250 again. Again, it's mostly so that people can get their practice reps before we go to Michigan. But I did something. I built a dwarf army despite hating dwarves. There's a whole backstory behind it. I'm not getting into it right now. But I am going to run dwarves for the league just because sometimes you need a break. You need to do something different, and that helps you get a fresh perspective. That's why when I play games, I always try to have 2 armies for the game, and I try to make sure that they're not the same because I can step away from rats. I can play dwarves. Dwarves tend to be more shooting focused. They have higher armor, but playing from that perspective will allow me to see things that I might not see if I'm only playing rats. So I will do a list preview on my league list, and then I think my first round starts next week. I'll be playing against Garrett. He's a local Plague player, and he's really good, so that'll be a nice test. I'll be able to see how well my list goes against him, and we'll do a recap on that once it's done. So probably next week we will do the league preview list, and then hopefully if I have time, I'll do my recap, but I don't know if I'll have time. Thanks a lot. I hope everybody enjoyed the little bit of a list breakdown that I did, and see everybody at Michigan GT.